Hey, what is going on, guys? This is Jake at That Fit Friend, and today I'm going to be covering some of the market's best CrossFit shoes. So I have pulled 7 shoes that all excel for CrossFit for slightly different reasons. So down below, I'm gonna have every model timestamped, and I'm gonna go through every shoe basically and list off the pros and cons that come along with it and where its nuances lie. This way, if you're looking into new shoes for CrossFit, you can pick the best model that contextually fits your wants and needs best. As always too, I do have a written roundup that is gonna be linked down in the description. Check that out. It has additional info on each of these models. But that being said, let's dive into our first shoe. The first model that I'm going to cover is the Rad 1. So Rad is relatively new to the CrossFit and cross-training shoe scene. However, I think they put together a really well-rounded model, especially for their first pass. So a few pros that come along with the Rad 1 is number one, the swell foam midsole in the shoe gives you a nice blend of stability and responsiveness. So this model is bouncy enough for lighter runs, plyometrics, double unders, etc., but it's also stable enough for heavy lifts. Pulling over 500 is never an issue in the shoe, especially when it comes to compression. So I do like the swell foam midsole in this model. The second pro with the shoe is that it's pretty dang durable. We have a full wrap around the entirety of this midsole here. So for rope climbs and any form of abrasion on this shoe, you're not going to experience breakdown really fast in this model, and the upper is pretty abrasion resistant as well. The third pro with this model is that they're a fairly good looking shoe. And now I know everybody will vary here when it comes to appearance, but I do like that you can rock this shoe to the gym and then out and about, and they look pretty good, especially in some of the more neutral colorways. In retrospect, I do wish I would have went with a different colorway, but I do like the look of the shoe, especially when it comes to its upper construction. Now, some cons that can come along with the Rad 1 is number one, they can run a little bit warm at times. So if you're training in hotter climates, the shoe can get a little bit hot, especially depending on the socks you are wearing. A second con with this model is they often do only small batch releases, so they're often sold out. And if you buy a pair and then you have to return them for a different size, that could be an issue with the shoe. And then the final con is that they come in at a price at $150 USD. While it is kind of in line with other premium CrossFit shoes, it is a little bit higher than what some are willing to pay. So if you're not down to pay $150 for a pair of shoes, this may not be the best model for you. All right, so now who should invest in the Rad 1? So I think if you're an athlete or a lifter that has a primary bias towards CrossFit and you like to add in some lifting and some athletic style training on a weekly basis and you want a shoe that's durable, the Rad 1 can be a great option to explore. Plus they're a smaller company and I like supporting smaller companies as well. So I think if you're looking for a well-rounded shoe for CrossFit, the Rad 1 is a great option to explore. The next shoe that I'm going to cover is the Strike Movement Haze Trainer. So 3 pros that come along with the Haze Trainer is number one, if you're somebody who likes a bit more ground feedback and articulation through the sole of their shoe, the Haze Trainer can be an awesome option to explore. The shoe has a much more minimalist feel and it articulates really well. So if you do want that in your training shoe, this is honestly one of the best options on the market, I think, at least for CrossFit, lifting, and cross training. The second pro that I have with this shoe is the Cush 50 midsole. So on top of being really articulative, this midsole does a really good job when it comes to stability when you're training heavy, but then also giving you a nice level of bounce. The shoe has a much more firm feel, so it does give you a bit more ground feedback in my opinion for things like sprints and jumps and plyometrics. So if you like that in your shoe, the Haze Trainer can be an awesome option to explore. The third pro that I have with the Haze Trainer is its overall appearance. So we have a jacquard knit upper, and other than that, it's relatively simplistic in nature. So if I'm ever traveling or if I need just one shoe to kind of bring with me to wear out and about and then to train in, the Haze Trainer is often one of my go-tos because it does look a little bit more formal. Like I could wear this to like a lunch meeting and then to go train in, and it does a good job in both contexts and it doesn't look like overly Jimmy in a more formal setting. So if that is something you prioritize with your training shoe asks, especially for CrossFit, the Haze Trainer can be an awesome option to explore. Now, 3 cons that come along with the Haze Trainer is number one, this model is not going to be the best pick for training outdoors, especially if you're going to be having abrasion on the upper of the shoe. So with this knit upper, we don't have a super beefed up toe guard up here. So if you're doing any form of toe dragging on concrete, this model can break down. So just keep in mind that if you have a big outdoor bias with your training and you're going to be doing like prone to get up work, or if you're going to be doing burpees outside, be very careful with the upper construction in the Haze Trainer. The second con that I have with the Haze Trainer is that they come in at a price point of $150 USD. So if you're trying to save money, or if $150 is just out of your budget, the Haze Trainer will likely not be the best pick for you. The third con that I have with the Haze Trainer is that returns can be kind of frustrating with Strike Movement. And this is based on conversations that I've now had with multiple lifters and athletes in the community. But if you want to return the model because you either don't like them, or if you want to swap them out for a different size, just be forewarned that it can be a little bit frustrating working with Strike Movement there. Also, they are often sold out, so they may not even have your size in stock. So Before you invest in this shoe, I would highly suggest understanding exactly what you're getting and trying to nail your sizing the first time. Now, who should invest in the Strike Movement Haze Trainer? I think if you're somebody who likes having a shoe that articulates really well and feels much more minimalist in nature, the Haze Trainer will resonate really well for you. They work so well in a lot of different contexts, and if you like having a sole that moves with you and gives you a bit more ground feedback, the Haze Trainer can be an awesome pick. So the next model I'm going to cover is the TYR CXT-1 Trainer. So similar to Rad, TYR is relatively new in the CrossFit scene. This model made a pretty big splash at the 2022 NOBULL CrossFit Games. So 3 pros that come along with the CXT-1 Trainer is number 1, I like the Surge Energy Foam midsole in this model. The forefoot gives you a nice level of bounce, but you get a nice level of stability throughout the entirety of this sole. So you can train really heavy in this shoe, you can do sprints, you can do double unders, box jumps, and it feels pretty dang comfortable. So I do like the blend of responsiveness and stability that you get with the shoe's midsole. The second pro that I have with this model is that if you like higher heel to toe drops in your cross training shoes, this can be a great option to explore. This model features a 9mm drop. That is pretty high compared to other cross training and CrossFit focused shoes. So if you like a bit more heel in your training shoe, that can be a perk. I'm personally a little bit lanky and tall, so I like having a bit more heel, especially for thrusters, wall balls, and squats. So I like that about this model. However, I do think that could be a con for some, which I'll talk about in a second. The third pro that I have with this shoe is the overall last construction and the upper. So we have an anatomical toe box here, so it doesn't taper aggressively like other cross training shoes. So it doesn't have necessarily the widest toe box, but it doesn't taper a ton. So if you have like a neutral width foot or even slightly wider foot, this model should work for you. I also like the breathable mesh upper, and that the boot back here is pretty reinforced, so you get a nice stable ankle back here at the boot. 3 cons that I have with the CXT-1 Trainer is number 1, and I mentioned this in my full review, but I ran into some durability issues here on the midfoot wrap on the lateral side of the shoe. So I'm hoping that this is kind of like an anomaly case and it's not something that everybody's going to run into, but I did have a little bit of breakdown here on this wrap of the shoe. It still functions fine. However, I am kind of missing a chunk of the wrap on this lateral side of this model. The second con that I could see folks having with the shoe is that high heel to toe drop. Well, I think it will resonate with some. If you like a drop that is lower to like 4mm or even close to 0, this model will likely feel like it's just too much shoe for you. You're gonna get a lot of heel, so that is something to consider before investing. My third con with the CXT-1 Trainer is that if you're somebody who likes a lower stack height in your training shoes and you want something that feels more minimalist, this may not be the best option for you. This model can feel like a lot of shoe at times, so if you do want something more minimalist, I would say steer clear of the CXT-1 Trainer. Now, who should invest in the CXT-1 Trainer? I think if you like having a higher heel to toe drop in your training shoes and you like a little bit more heel for your workouts, and you also like a little bit of arch and ankle support, this can be a great option to explore. It performs really well in versatile workouts, it performs well for lifting, and as a whole, the CXT-1 Trainer does a pretty good job across the board. The next shoe that I'm going to cover is the Inov-8 F-Lite G300. So 3 pros that I have with this model is number 1, it's a pretty well-rounded training shoe. So if you're going to be investing in this shoe primarily for CrossFit, but you also want it for some heavy lifting sessions, some athletic style sessions, and even some sprints here and there, this model does a really good job. You get a nice blend of responsiveness and stability with the shoe's EVA midsole. The second pro that I have with this model is that durability tends to be pretty good in this shoe. You have a nice aggressive outsole wrap here on the lateral and medial side of the midfoot, you have a nice knit upper that's pretty abrasion resistant, and you have a graphene construction on the outsole. So from a long-term durability standpoint, the shoe does a pretty good job. You also have a TPU midfoot cage for additional abrasion resistance. The third pro that I have with this model is that it's a booty style shoe. So if you like booty style shoes, I think you'll enjoy this about the G300. It fits really well, it form fits and hugs the foot really well, especially through the midfoot. So if you like that in training shoes, I do think you'll enjoy how this model fits and performs. Now, when it comes to the cons of the Inov-8 F-Lite G300, the first con is that the midfoot can run pretty dang narrow. So if you have a flatter or wider foot, this will not be the best model for you. I think you'll feel like you're too limited here through the midfoot for overall comfort. The second con that I have with this shoe is that the price point can run pretty high. So similar to the Rad 1 and the Haze Trainer, this model comes in around $150 USD. So if you're trying to save though, what I would suggest is look for Inov-8 coupons. That's what I often do when I buy Inov-8 shoes, but outright at $150, that price point may not resonate for everybody, especially if you're trying to save a little bit of money. The third con that I have with this shoe, and this was also a pro, is the booty style construction. If you like a separate tongue and you don't want booty style constructions in your CrossFit focused shoes, this would be a model that you'll want to steer clear of. Now, who should invest in the Inov-8 F-Lite G300? I think if you like a shoe that fits a bit more athletically when it comes to the midfoot to forefoot transition, and you also like booty style shoes that are pretty well rounded for a little bit of everything, this model can be a great option to explore. Plus, they do have a pretty good amount of durability put into them. The next shoe that I'll cover is the Nike Metcon 8. So 3 pros that I have with the Metcon 8 is number 1, we have a reworked upper construction. So in the Metcon 7, if you're gonna run into durability issues, generally that was gonna be with the chain link mesh upper pulling off of this React foam midsole. In this model, we now have a mesh upper with synthetic overlays. It feels a bit more abrasion resistant. Granted, that does come with a con. I'll talk about that in a second, but I do like the reworked upper construction in the Metcon 8 when it comes to long-term durability. The second pro that I have with this shoe is that it has a nice bias towards lifting. So if you want a shoe for primarily lifting, but with some CrossFit sprinkled in on a weekly basis, I think the Metcon 8 can be a pretty great option to explore. It works really well for lifting with this hyperlift insert and with the React foam in the forefoot. While it is a bit more responsive, I don't think it necessarily takes away from a ton of stability. The third pro that I have with this shoe is that with this outsole wrap here on the lateral and medial side, this is a pretty good option for rope climbs. So if you like to use your feet a lot for rope climbs, or if you want a shoe that is pretty dang durable for that, this model works pretty well. Plus we do have, once again, I think a better upper construction when it comes to durability. And we also have this lace lock feature to tuck those laces so they don't come undone when you're training. 3 cons that come along with the Nike Metcon 8 is number 1, the heel construction. This hyperlift insert takes away from this model's performance for short runs, sprints, etc. It's pretty dang uncomfortable, and even when it comes to like walking around, this shoe is probably not going to be your best bet. So the heel is a limiter in the Nike Metcon 8's performance when it comes to versatility. The second con that I have with the Metcon 8 is that if you have a wider foot similar to the Inov-8 F-Lite G 300, this model will likely not be your best bet. It does have a slightly more tapered midfoot here going into the forefoot, so it can feel a little bit limiting for folks who need a bit more width through their midfoot. The third con with the Nike Metcon 8, and I mentioned this briefly in my pros, is that with this reworked upper construction, it does run a little bit warmer. So if you're training in hotter settings, this model can feel a little bit warm at times depending on the socks that you're wearing. So now who should invest in the Nike Metcon 8? So I think if you like Nike shoes and you like how they typically fit, and on a weekly basis, you primarily do a lot of lifting, but with a little bit of CrossFit sprinkled in, the Nike Metcon 8 can do a really good job for that context. Just note that this is not going to be your best CrossFit shoe when it comes to being like the most well-rounded and best for versatility. The next shoe I'm going to cover is the NOBULL Trainer Plus. Now do note that the OG NOBULL Trainer does work for CrossFit really well, but I want to include the Trainer Plus because I do feel like it's a tiny bit more inclusive for a wider range of athletes. So 3 pros that I have with the Trainer Plus is number 1, we have a slightly thicker EVA foam midsole in this model. Now for some lifting contexts this can actually be a con, however the pro of this is that it gives this model a much more comfortable feel. So for jumping, short runs, the Trainer Plus is a lot better when it comes to the overall comfort and ride you're going to get compared to the OG Trainer. Plus it doesn't take away from stability as a whole from the shoe. You can still lift plenty heavy in the Trainer Plus. The second pro that I have with the Trainer Plus is the super fabric upper. So one thing and one area where I think NOBULL trainers often go right with their shoes is with their upper constructions and their overall durability. So with the super fabric upper in the shoe, I don't think you're going to be prone to any rip issues or abrasion causing the shoe to break down. So if you want a shoe that is going to last a while, the Trainer Plus can be an awesome option to explore. And the third pro with the Trainer Plus is we have a more aggressive herringbone tread patterning. So if you like to train outdoors regularly and you also do a lot of CrossFit style workouts, whether it be outdoors and then indoors, this shoe can be a great option to explore. You get a nice level of tread on different surfaces and you get a nice level of durability with this outsole wrap over the toe box. 3 cons that I have with the Trainer Plus is number 1, it can feel a bit chunky and clunky at times. So if you like less midsole, this may not be the best option for you. You might want to look into the OG NOBULL Trainer if you are looking into NOBULL shoes, because with this thicker EVA foam midsole, it does feel a little bit heavy and boat-like at times, especially if you like a lower profile shoe. The second con that I have with the Trainer Plus is that the super fabric upper can run a little bit warm at times, and this is similar to other NOBULL trainers. So the upper in the shoe doesn't have the best breathability, so if you're training in hotter climates, that could be an issue that you want to consider. The third con that I have with the Trainer Plus, and this kind of piggybacks off my first con, is that we do have a bit of toe spring in this shoe, and with the thicker EVA foam midsole and with this more aggressive and like thick outsole wrap, it can be a little bit tough to ground the toes in this model. So for things like heavy deadlifts where you really want to ground the feet, this model isn't necessarily my favorite pick. So that is a limiter for the shoe's performance for certain lifting contexts. Now who should invest in the NOBULL Trainer Plus? So I think if you have a slightly wider midfoot and if you use like custom orthotics or insoles and you need a bit more upper volume, this can be a great option to explore. Plus it does work really well for outdoor workouts. So if you do have a big outdoor bias on a weekly basis when it comes to your training, the NOBULL Trainer Plus can be a great option to explore. The final shoe that I want to cover is the PUMA Fuse 2.0. Now, this might be somewhat of a controversial pick, especially because the PUMA Fuse, the OG model, was basically so hit or miss for a wide range of lifters and athletes. But the PUMA Fuse 2, I think, is a step in the right direction for Puma's brand, and they also have a pretty budget-friendly price, and that's also why I wanted to include them here. So 3 pros that come with the PUMA Fuse 2 is number 1, their price point. This model comes in at $100 USD. Now that is up $10 USD compared to the PUMA Fuse, but I do think that this model's construction is like new and improved and a little bit better. So if you're trying to drop about like $100 on a pair of shoes that will work for CrossFit, lifting, and versatile training, the PUMA Fuse 2.0 does a pretty good job. The second pro that I have with this shoe is that Puma reworked the midfoot construction and the upper construction. So I like the upper because it breathes pretty well, it feels relatively lightweight, and it feels very athletic. And I like the midfoot construction because they've reworked the wraps here on the midfoot, and I think it's a little bit better for rope climbing. Now, it's still not going to be your best shoe for rope climbing, but it definitely fares better than the Puma Fuse, which ran into durability issues with the lateral side of the shoe's upper. The third pro that I have with this shoe is that if you have a heavy bias towards more athletic style and versatile training on a weekly basis with your CrossFit workouts, this model I think does a very good job. So we have a drop-in midsole with this shoe, and it gives you a nice level of pop and bounce. So for sprints, for plyometrics, I've really enjoyed this shoe, and it has a nice level of articulation, so you get a nice level of grip and feel with this Puma Grip outsole. 3 cons that I have with the Puma Fuse 2 is number 1, I don't think this is going to be your best bet for heavy lifting. So with this drop-in midsole, it gives you a nice level of bounce. However, it does start to compress around like 365 in squats and around like 455 in deadlifts. So if you're training heavier than those thresholds, that would definitely be something to consider in the shoe because you might experience a little bit of compression with this drop-in midsole. The second con that I have with the Puma Fuse 2 is its long-term durability. So while I think the durability of the shoe is better than the Puma Fuse, if you compared this model, when it comes to long-term durability with every other shoe featured in this video, I think this model would probably fall short the fastest just because we do have a lighter weight upper, and also this is a budget-friendly model, so there will be limitations with its overall build quality. The third con that I have with the Puma Fuse 2 is if you use custom orthotics or insoles, you'll want to steer clear of this model. We have a low profile upper construction, and with this drop-in midsole, you can't really take it out because then you just have the sole. So if you have, for example, a very thin insole, you're pretty much going to have nothing separating your foot from the floor, so that may make the shoe a little bit more uncomfortable for your needs. And if you try to stack your insole or orthotic on this drop-in midsole, you may not have enough room in the upper of the shoe to make it feel comfortable. So now who should invest in the Puma Fuse 2? I think if you're somebody who's much more recreational with their training and their CrossFit workouts, and you want to save as much money as possible, the Puma Fuse 2 will be a good option. At $100 USD, this model can hold its own for CrossFit workouts, for lifting, and for versatile training. Just note that compared to all the other shoes featured in this video, the Puma Fuse 2 I think is the least strong performing, relatively speaking. Alright guys, that wraps up this roundup breaking down some of the market's best CrossFit shoes. As always, these are only some options to explore, or at least help you on your way in your search to finding the best CrossFit shoes for your needs. There are obviously other shoes that will work just as well outside of the options picked for this video. In fact, if you have a shoe that you have been loving for CrossFit workouts that I didn't include, let me know in the comments below. Let's add a nice beefy list of shoe options for other folks who are looking for their perfect pair of shoes. Now that being said, if you have additional questions on any of the models featured in this video, drop a comment down below or reach out to me personally, whichever you prefer. And as always, drop a like on the video, subscribe to the channel. I'll see you in the next one.